General Hospital will reveal Kai lay motionless on the cold hospital bed, the crisp white sheet pulled up to his chest, fragile as a thin veil covering a body that was slowly withering away. The harsh fluorescent lights above cast a glaring, merciless brightness onto his pallid face, accentuating the lifeless hue of his skin. The entire hospital room was saturated with the sharp scent of antiseptic, its chill as suffocating as the grim fate that seemed to be closing in on Kai. Surrounding him were machines. Their incessant beeping creating a chaotic symphony where each heartbeat, each breath, each vital sign flashing on the monitors became a desperate battle between life and death. The advanced surgery that was supposed to usher in a new chapter for Kai, one of hope, of dreams reignited by the fire of his passion for football, had, cruelly, taken a turn for the worse. The doctors, soldiers clad in white coats battling tirelessly against death, fought with every ounce of their knowledge and skill, encircling Kai in a frantic attempt to reclaim him from the merciless hands of fate. Yet, all their efforts could not alter the tragic outcome. Kai had fallen into critical condition. His life now dangling by the thinnest of threads, threatening to snap at any moment. His heart rate on the monitor grew erratic, fluctuating wildly in a chaotic rhythm as if the maestro had abandoned the orchestra mid-performance. Numbers flashed in urgent red, each pulse a siren of impending doom. In his haze of semi-consciousness, Kai murmured faint, broken words, his voice barely a whisper, carried away by the sterile air. Though his eyelids remained closed against the agony, there was a fierce, burning light behind them, a final wish etched into his fading soul, to see his parents one last time before darkness claimed him forever. Trina stood silently by his bedside, her small hands clutching the edge of the blanket as if by sheer will she could anchor Kai to this world. Her gaze, blurred with tears, never wavered from his face. Each shallow breath he drew slashed deeper into her heart. She had never felt so helpless. Every second dragged like an iron weight, suffocating her spirit. Yet it could not extinguish the fire of determination blazing inside her. Without hesitation, Trina sprang into action. She mobilized every contact she had. Every scrap of information she could recall, old phone numbers, scattered email addresses, fleeting mentions of places. She made frantic calls, sent desperate messages. Reached out to anyone who might know something. Her voice trembled with urgency, her hands shook with fear that Kai might slip away before she could fulfill his final wish. Time slipped through her fingers like grains of sand in a death clock until, finally, a miracle, a response. His parents were on their way. When the door to the hospital room swung open, the sharp creak of the hinges slicing through the heavy silence, Trina turned and nearly dropped the tray she was holding. She froze, her eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. Two figures entered, a man and a woman, radiating an aura of such commanding presence that the very air seemed to crystallize around them. The man led the way, tall and broad-shouldered, his face chiseled like stone. Silver streaked through his dark hair, and his piercing gaze was as cold and sharp as twin ice-blue daggers. His every movement exuded an effortless authority. A quiet but devastating promise that nothing could stand in his path without being obliterated. His presence alone caused those lingering in the hallway outside to instinctively avert their eyes and lower their heads. Beside him, the woman moved with a deceptively soft grace. She was slender, elegant in a simple gray dress, but the cautious precision of her movements spoke volumes. Her dark brown eyes, seemingly warm at first glance, shimmered with an underlying sharpness. A vigilance born from a life spent navigating dangers lurking behind every door. She approached Kai with a careful grace, each step measured, ready to react should the world around her suddenly turn hostile. The air in the room compressed, so heavy that Trina found it difficult to breathe. Instinctively, she stepped back, her hand gripping the edge of a nearby table to steady herself. Everything about these two strangers screamed a truth more chilling than the sterile chill of the hospital room. They were not ordinary parents grieving for a dying son. They moved with the poise of those accustomed to wielding influence, concealing secrets. And surviving in a world where power mattered more than love. They had come not just for a farewell, but with the weight of mysteries, legacies, and a dangerous past that Trina could only begin to imagine. Kai, summoning the last fragile reserves of strength left within his broken body, struggled to open his eyes. His eyelids fluttered weakly, heavy as stone, until finally they lifted just enough for him to see through the haze of pain and the blinding hospital lights. The sight that greeted him was one he had not dared hope for in his darkest moments, the figures of his parents standing at the edge of his hospital bed. In that instant, a single tear, thin and glistening, traced a slow, trembling path down his gaunt, hollowed cheek, a silent testament to the overwhelming storm of emotions crashing within him, relief, sorrow, and a crushing, desperate love. The man, his father, stepped forward, the deliberate, solemn cadence of his movements heavy with restrained agony. Without hesitation, he reached for Kai's hand, enveloping it completely in his own much larger, calloused palm. The moment their skin touched, the frigid barrier that had seemed so impenetrable in the man's steely eyes cracked and shattered. His composed, impenetrable mask of power dissolved, and raw, naked grief flooded his features. His shoulders trembled slightly, betraying the profound devastation that no amount of strength or control could suppress. It was not the grief of a distant, powerful man, it was the agony of a father watching the light of his life slip away beyond his reach. Kai's mother lowered herself gently onto the edge of the bed, her movements delicate and full of tenderness that words could never express. Her slender fingers brushed lovingly through Kai's disheveled hair, smoothing it away from his damp forehead in a gesture so full of care and heartbreak that it seemed to still the very air around them. Leaning in close, her lips hovered just above his ear. And she whispered something, a secret, a prayer, or perhaps a farewell, in a voice so soft that only Kai could hear. Whatever words she spoke, they carried the weight of a lifetime of love, regret, and promises made too late. From behind the thin hospital curtain, Trina watched, her body rigid with a confusion of awe, dread, and sorrow. Her heart thundered against her ribcage so violently she thought it might shatter. This was a reunion she had fought so hard to orchestrate, and yet the sheer intensity of it left her paralyzed. She pressed herself deeper into the shadowed corner, as if hoping she could make herself invisible, too overwhelmed to intervene, too respectful to intrude on this sacred moment of final reconciliation. But the true shock was yet to come. Without warning, Kai's father, still gripping his son's hand with fierce protectiveness, turned his head and locked eyes directly with Trina. His gaze, sharp, cutting, and impossibly penetrating, felt like a blade driving straight through her soul. For a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning. She could feel the weight of his stare anchoring her to the spot, stripping away any defenses she had left. And then, in a voice so low it rumbled through the silence yet carried the force of a thunderclap, he spoke. His words were not shouted, nor were they said in anger. They were spoken with an unshakable certainty, with a gravity that demanded they be heard, believed, and feared. In a few simple, devastating sentences, he exposed a truth that shattered everything Trina thought she knew. Kai was not merely an exceptionally gifted college football player fighting for his life. He was the scion of a clandestine dynasty whose influence stretched across continents, weaving through the shadows of governments, corporations, and clandestine networks alike. His parents were not ordinary people mourning their dying son, they were titans of a secret world few dared to even whisper about, a world where power was currency, loyalty was demanded, and betrayal was dealt with ruthlessly. The blood that ran through Kai's veins was not just the blood of an athlete or a dreamer. It was the blood of kings without crowns. Rulers whose names were never spoken aloud but whose decisions shaped the fate of millions. Kai had been born to inherit this legacy. Groomed from his earliest years to one day take the mantle and command the invisible empire built by generations before him. But Kai had rejected that future. He had turned his back on destiny itself. choosing instead the fleeting normalcy of a young man chasing dreams on green fields beneath open skies. He had fled from the life he was meant to lead, carving out a fragile existence in the sunlight, far from the dark corridors of power his parents still ruled. And now, lying on the threshold between life and death, he was being pulled back into that hidden world, whether he wished it or not. Trina stood frozen, the revelation crashing over her like a tidal wave. She had believed she knew Kai, his kindness, his determination, his silent strength. But now, seeing him through the prism of this terrible, awe-inspiring truth, she realized how little she had truly understood. Every choice, every hesitation, every secretive glance, all of it made a devastating kind of sense now. The silence that followed was deafening, charged with the weight of what had been revealed and the inevitability of what would come next. Kai's mother pressed a trembling kiss to his forehead, and his father's grip on his hand tightened, as if willing his son to hold on just a little longer. And Trina, standing alone in the shadows, knew with chilling certainty that nothing, not her life, not Kai's, not the world as she knew it, would ever be the same again. Because of his desperate flight from the life that had been mapped out for him since birth. Kai had severed every tie that bound him to his past. He had cut all communication with his family, abandoned the name he was born with, and buried his true identity under layers of lies and half-truths. For years, he had lived in hiding among those who had no idea of the bloodline he carried, forging a life of his own making, a fragile, precious existence built on the illusion of anonymity. Even Trina, the person who perhaps knew him best, had been kept in the dark. To her, Kai was simply a young man chasing dreams, battling obstacles with quiet determination. She had never known that behind his shy smiles and quiet resilience lay the heavy weight of a destiny he had tried so desperately to escape. But now, on the threshold between life and death, Kai could no longer deny the blood that bound him irrevocably to his origins. Nor could he prevent his parents, the architects of his lineage, from appearing at his bedside and dragging long-buried truths into the harsh light of day. The past he had fled from had finally caught up with him, not with anger or retribution, but with the inevitable finality of fate itself. Trina stood frozen, every muscle in her body locked in place, her throat constricted so tightly she could hardly breathe. A part of her burned with the need to step forward, to demand answers, to force Kai to explain everything he had hidden, the life he had never trusted her enough to reveal. 1,000 questions raced through her mind, each more urgent and agonizing than the last. Who exactly was Kai? What had he been running from all these years? And why had he never told her the truth? But as she looked at him, his body so frail, his face contorted in a fragile mixture of pain, regret, and an aching, silent plea for forgiveness, all her anger melted away. In its place remained only a deep, aching sorrow. She could see it so clearly now, written in every shallow breath he struggled to take, in every tremor of his weakened frame. Kai's time was slipping through their fingers, draining away faster than either of them could stop. There would be no heated confrontation, no desperate demands for the truth. Not now. Not when every second counted more than every word. Kai's parents wasted not a moment. They moved with a precision and certainty that spoke of years spent making decisions that changed the course of lives, and now, in this most personal of moments, they acted no differently. Kai's father, with hands steady despite the storm raging behind his eyes, withdrew a small, weathered envelope from the inner pocket of his tailored coat. The paper was thick and heavy. And though Trina could only catch a fleeting glimpse of it from where she stood, she could see the metallic gleam of powerful crests and seals embossed across its surface. Whatever lay inside. It was not merely paper, it was authority, leverage, salvation, written in the language of the powerful. He pressed the envelope into Kai's hand with a solemnity that was almost ceremonial, as though passing on a sacred relic. It was a last lifeline, a final gamble against the inevitable, the only chance, however slim, that Kai could survive the forces arrayed against him. Beside him, Kai's mother moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. From around her neck, she unclasped a chain, revealing an ancient, ornate ring. The gold was aged and dulled by time. But the intricate design carved into its surface spoke of a lineage stretching back centuries, a family that had endured, thrived, and dominated across generations. She slid the ring carefully onto Kai's limp finger, her hands trembling just slightly despite her composed facade. This was not merely a keepsake, it was a pledge. A binding vow that no matter how far Kai had tried to run, no matter how fervently he had sought to carve out a different life, he was, and always would be, a son of their blood. A rightful heir to a legacy that could never truly be abandoned. The ring seemed to glow faintly against Kai's pallid skin, as if the very metal recognized its true owner at last. In that moment, the hospital room seemed to shrink, the sterile walls pressing in closer, the beeping of machines fading into a dull, distant hum. Trina watched, rooted to the spot. Her heart cracking under the unbearable weight of love, loss, and helplessness. She understood, with a clarity sharper than any blade, that this was goodbye, not just to the Kai she had known, but perhaps to any future they might have shared. The past, the present, and the future had collided in that small room, and there was no undoing the impact. All that remained was the flicker of Kai's weakening heartbeat, the silent exchange of promises too deep for words, and the knowledge that no matter how fiercely one might flee from destiny, it would always find a way to call you home in the end. Kai, with the last remnants of life flickering weakly within him, summoned all the strength he had left to reach out and clasp Trina's hand. His grip was frail, trembling, yet filled with a desperate intensity that spoke volumes more than any words could have. His fingers, cold and shaking, tightened around hers as if trying to anchor himself to this world a moment longer, to hold on to the one person who had never abandoned him even when the truth had shattered everything they once knew. His eyes, half-lidded and dim with pain, locked onto Trina's. In their depths swirled a storm of emotion so raw, so overwhelming, that Trina could hardly bear to meet his gaze. Gratitude shimmered there, profound and infinite, gratitude for her courage, her loyalty, her unwavering presence when he had been at his most vulnerable. Alongside it was regret. Heavy and sorrowful, for the secrets he had kept, for the dreams he had allowed to crumble between them, for the future he now knew he could never give her. And beneath it all, shining brightest even as the light in his eyes began to fade, was love, pure, deep, and heartbreakingly unspoken. It was a love that had remained locked away inside him, waiting for a tomorrow that would never come, a love that now reached out to her in silence, in touch, in tears that he could no longer shed. Suddenly, the shrill, piercing wail of the heart monitor filled the room, stretching into one long, unbroken note, a sound that tore through the silence like a knife through fragile glass. Instantly, the calm dissolved into chaos. Doctors and nurses burst into the room, their faces grim but focused, shouting orders over the blaring alarms. Their hands moved swiftly, expertly, as they fought to reclaim Kai from the yawning abyss that threatened to swallow him whole. In the flurry of motion, Trina was jostled backward, a nurse's firm hands guiding her out of the way. Disoriented and panicked, she stumbled into the hallway, the door swinging shut behind her with a terrible finality. She stood there, frozen. As the muffled sounds of the frantic struggle on the other side reached her ears, the shouted instructions, the clatter of equipment, the relentless drone of machines fighting a battle they might already have lost. Tears streamed freely down Trina's cheeks, blurring her vision, soaking her skin with the salt of helpless grief. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth to stifle the sobs threatening to tear free from her chest. It felt as though an invisible hand had gripped her heart and was squeezing tighter and tighter, crushing it with every passing second. She had never known helplessness could feel so visceral, so suffocating, as though she were drowning in sorrow and terror and rage all at once. Behind the closed door, Kai's fate was being decided. Every moment stretched endlessly, each second another cruel reminder that she was utterly powerless to help him now. All she could do was wait, wait and hope and pray with a desperation that bordered on madness. And yet, amidst the wreckage of her shattered heart, something fierce and unbreakable ignited within Trina. As she pressed her forehead against the cool wall of the hallway, trembling and weeping, a vow was born deep in her soul, a vow as immutable and eternal as the love she had seen in Kai's dying eyes. No matter what secrets had been dragged into the light, no matter how dark or dangerous the truth about his past might be, Trina would never turn her back on him. She would never allow fear, betrayal, or sorrow to erase the bond they had forged. She would fight for Kai, for his memory, for his redemption, for his right to be remembered not as a pawn of powerful forces, but as the brave, beautiful soul he had been. Even if she had to stand alone against the world, Trina would honor the promise that had taken root inside her in that fragile, heart-wrenching moment. She would carry Kai's fight within her, refusing to let him vanish into silence without a legacy, without a voice. He had battled for every heartbeat, every breath, every fleeting second of life, and now, she would battle for him. Because love, real love, does not surrender, even when the heart that first gave it life beats no more.